course, 14th of November, a public holiday where people will get the chance to cast their votes. And Fijian Elections Office already confirming today the postal voting applications closed at 5 p.m. today. So if you have got your postal voting application approved, you will be voting through postal ballot. So that will also take place within the next few days. Postal voting starting, pre-polling starting from 5th November, and the rest of the voters, majority of the voters, to cast their votes on the 14th of November. Tonight we have the leader of Unity Fiji in the studio with us, Mr. Savenaca Narube. Mr. Narube, on behalf of the listeners of VTFM and those who are watching the live stream on Facebook, Fiji Village, we'd like to thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, let's get right into it. Unity Fiji, a new party. Why set up a new party, Mr. Narube?
Thank you, Vijay, and I'd like to say hello to all your viewers, both on air and also on, I believe, Facebook. Yeah, that's the question, one of the questions that we are asked frequently. Why did we establish a new party? What we had looked at all aspects of the economy as well as the political landscape over these years. We have tracked very closely the independent polls on the support of each party that is in parliament, the Tabat polls in particular, and we saw that all the support of all the three parties in government has really declined. Some more than others. But that surprises us, because we expected if one party's support goes down, perhaps the others would benefit from that decline in support. But it's strange that all three, support for all three parties have declined, and persistently declined over the years. So we asked the question, where are these people leaving these parties going to? And we see this large number that are undecided. It's around 40 or even more % at that time. And these are the ones, the voters that have assessed the existing parties. But they have decided to sit there and wait. And that's where we focus on perhaps what are they waiting for. They know the existing parties quite well. They know that. But they still haven't decided to move to another party. So we thought that perhaps they're looking at something new, something fresh, something, a new leadership that perhaps knows what needs to be, the agenda that needs to be done. So that's, to us, was the critical information that we decided that, yes, we must try to get this undecided. So the best thing we agreed on is to establish a new party.
Unity Fiji party leader Mr. Savenaca Narube is on Straight Talk tonight. You can call on 3314-766 if you have any questions. Now, your assessment on those statistics, the percentages you're saying. Fiji First
yes,
still maintains a good lead in support as far as those results are concerned. What's your assessment of Fiji First based on the percentages that you've seen?
If you look at the Tabat polls, which we believe is independent, and we saw, I think their latest poll was in February this year. It's been some time. I expect them to undertake a new one anytime soon. But we saw that support of Fiji First dropping from 59% of the votes in 2014 down to just over 30%. 30%, and that's a big drop.
There's some other surveys done where it's showing that they have a commanding lead as far as support is concerned.
Yeah, those are other surveys that are around, but we focus on the Tabat because we believe it's independent.
Have you got that feeling off the ground as well when you're going around?
And that is confirmed by our consultations with the people, our Talanoa sessions that we have that we have undertaken right throughout the country, and we have been to many places in Fiji. It confirms that drop in the support.
You believe that the support for SODELPA and NFP has also dropped?
Yes. That according to that survey, they both drop in different
degrees. Do you believe
degrees.
that NFP, which just managed to get just over 5% threshold, may not be making the threshold?
Well, I'm not in any position to forecast
based on your assessment.
NFP, but we believe that those data that the independent polls have indicated would point to some strengthening or perhaps a different approach by SODELPA and NFP if they are going to maintain their positions in the 2014 election.
Now, you're saying you set up the new party because there were undecided voters. Sometimes, or most of the times, that happens because if polls are taken in February, elections are later on in the year, people get into it, try to find out what are the policies, what will happen next, and then make a decision. Do you believe that may be happening?
Sure. I think that's a large element of it. As the election nears, they get more information and they will then make a choice. But the data that I was referring to was basically was from 2017, the whole of 2017, and earlier this year.
Now, don't you think that you will split the votes further, and this may result in a few parties not reaching the 5% threshold?
I fully agree. If you think that you cannot reach the threshold, your party should not run in the elections, because that's the risk that you mentioned, that you will lose the votes.
Well, the threshold will stand at about, what, 31,000? You've done your numbers?
Yeah,
32,000?
around that, depending on the turnout to the elections, around 31,000. So we believe through our consultations and through the messages that we have given to the people that we will get over that threshold.
What if you don't? What happens like in 2014 when a few parties couldn't make the threshold and the votes were split and people were saying that this has split up the votes, and none of the parties who were the smaller parties at that time were Fiji Labour Party, People's Democratic Party, Fiji United Freedom Party, who did not make the threshold?
Yeah, I guess for them to answer that. But for us, we believe that we have done our homework, we have done the preparation, and the votes are split already. As I said, there's a large number of undecided voters waiting. They know the existing party, but they are not moving there as yet. So that gives us an opening. Perhaps that was not the case in 2014.
Mr. Savenaca Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji, is in the studio tonight on Straight Talk. You can call on 3314-766 with your questions. Now, Mr. Narube, you were Permanent Secretary for Finance and then Reserve Bank of Fiji Governor. After 2000 and 2006 coups, what roles were you holding? And what of course, you held the position of Permanent Secretary for Finance during around the 2000 period. Now, as Permanent Secretary for Finance, after the coup, what responsibilities did you have to carry out? I believe that you have spoken about it during your campaign meetings as well.
Sure. I think the crisis of 2000 and 2006 and 1987 as well, it really puts a burden on organizations like the Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance to hold together either the finances of the country as well as the economy of the country. So that's a tough ask in any kind of crisis that we have. So for me, as a Permanent Secretary of Finance, the most priority for me was to safeguard our financial position. So we had to take...
After the 87 coup, you were in the civil service?
87, I was with the central bank.
With the central bank?
Correct.
But you were not holding positions of Permanent Secretary and Reserve Bank of Governor, Reserve Bank of Fiji. Now, just talking about 2000, because that's a critical position in 2000 as Permanent Secretary for Finance, you were the Chief Accounting Officer of the ministry. Now, as far as 2000 was concerned, there were sanctions as well. There was a 15% pay cut for civil servants. You managed to stay afloat. What could have happened if those actions were not taken in 2000?
Yeah, you see what happens in a crisis is that when confidence is reduced in a crisis, then people kind of try to safeguard their assets, safeguard their cash. And in that case, the economy drops. They don't want to spend any money. And more importantly, for a country like us that depends on the international economies to give us tourism and for us to sell our exports to, that also declines. So tourism dried up immediately after the 2000 coup. So our foreign reserves also drops at that time. So for me, was to make sure that the essential services of government are still delivered to the people, which means you have to protect your financial position. So you are right. We reduced wages of civil servants by 15%. We cut some expenses that we thought shouldn't be there. And for us, just tightening the processes of payment, like the LPOs, and for instance, so the local purchase orders. So that's the way of safeguarding the coffers or the financial position of
If
government.
that wouldn't have been done, what would have happened in 2000?
Well, who knows? But as
you should know. You were the permanent secretary for
sure,
finance.
yeah, the
You would have
risks
made
are
your
there.
assessments.
The risks of something that we may not be able to deliver essential services because we can't pay people, for instance. We can't, perhaps the essential services like health, education. Those would probably be something that might have happened. It's serious.
In 2006, again, you were the governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji then. In 2006, I believe foreign reserves was at an all-time low going into the end of 2006?
Yes, well, reserves were adequate, but our cushion of reserves could have been much higher. We normally look at 5 months' worth of foreign reserves as something adequate.
And what were we sitting on?
I think we were sitting around that, about 4.5%, 4.5 months of imports.
And what's the best cushion to have for foreign reserves, and to also to explain to people why foreign reserves is important for us?
Yeah, I think that'll be good if I may do that.
Just for the...
Yes, of course.
In layman's terms, please.
Yeah. We import a lot because what we manufacture or we can produce here in Fiji is not enough to satisfy all our requirements, particularly on food items. So we import a lot. We import medicine, essential medicine. So we need foreign reserves for that, because people that are selling us this medicine, selling us this food, they cannot be paid in Fiji dollar. It's no good to them. They would like to be paid in international currencies like the US dollars, the Australian dollars. So that's foreign reserves, that a pool of foreign currencies that we maintain offshore, of international currencies, that every time that you purchase something from abroad, you use the money from that.
So your foreign reserves have to be healthy, just for listeners and viewers out there, to ensure that you are making your payments when you're importing goods and services, because it will be in that currency. So foreign reserves is a very important component for our country. Now,
exactly.
According to statistics, the RBF statistics, the 2006 foreign reserves stood at $515 million. $515 million. Now, according to the statistics, RBF statistics, 2017 going into 2018, our foreign reserves are standing at about $2.3 billion.
Right.
Is that healthy?
Yeah.
As a former governor, what would you say?
The absolute amount of foreign reserves doesn't mean too much.
No, I'm just asking you because we talked about amounts and it came to that.
No.
Now, is $2.3 billion healthy?
It doesn't mean too much.
Doesn't mean too much. So what
the
would be
coverage
healthy?
of your imports is what matters. Because what happens if when you devalue your currency, your imports also rises and your foreign reserves rise.
Of course. So
what you can
with
buy,
that amount, you'll
if
have
I
to
may
pay
say so,
more as far as Fiji dollars is concerned.
Yeah.
But what would be the ideal amount?
You should look at the import cover of foreign reserves.
So how much would that be?
And I think it will cover perhaps the same amount of import cover as the lower figure. So you have to look at that from the import cover rather than just the absolute amount.
Now, as far as economy is concerned, you have said a lot about the economy. We will talk about that as well. But in 2006, after the coup, you were the governor of the Reserve Bank, again in that position. What type of action did you have to take and who did you work with?
Well, the first thing to do in a crisis, as far as the Reserve Bank is concerned, is to protect that foreign reserves that we were discussing. So as people perhaps face uncertainty during the crisis and after the crisis, they would like to send their money out of Fiji in whatever form. So what we did was to move very, very quickly to introduce quantitative limits on how much a person can send offshore. And that's through commercial banks and money dealers at that time. So that's what we did. We tightened the conditions of repatriation of money offshore.
Who did you work with during that time to ensure that we get the economy back on track?
Well, basically with the government, of course, and on the other industries as well, like tourism industries, for instance, to try to recover the tourism numbers as quickly as we can.
Mr. Narube, I've just got the statistics. RBF, the foreign reserve level increased further in August, and it's sufficient to cover 5 months of retained imports of goods and non-factor services. So what do you think of the foreign reserve level based on the import cover that we have at the moment?
Yeah, as I said, 5 months is about the target that you want.
That would be the best.
It's not the best, could be more, could be 7, could be 8. In some countries, it's 12 months of imports. But for us, given our economic structure in our exports base, we think that 5 months.
That's why, you were former governor of the Reserve Bank. I wanted you to tell the listeners what would be the ideal amount and for how much months of import cover would be ideal.
5 months.
5 months would be ideal.
5 months we can live with 5 months.
Now, people, those who would like to call, you can call on 3314-766. You have any questions for our guest tonight, and that is the Unity Fiji leader, Savenaca Narube. Now, Mr. Narube, when is your manifesto coming out?
Well, our manifesto is ready. We will plan to launch it this Friday at 10 a.m.
Okay, so why leave it this late? Because people have been waiting to find out what's in the manifestos of all parties. We've been asking the political parties whether they will have enough time to tell the people, to explain to the people what their policies mean. Why leave it so late?
I mean, all the other parties have launched it as late as last week or this week, I believe.
Some haven't even launched it.
Some haven't even launched it. And I think the uncertainty of the election date had a lot to do with it. Because to be smart, you make sure that you launch it not too early and, of course, not too late. So it's a combination of issues. But we have been out there telling the people, this is what we believe in, this is what we will do. So some of those issues in the manifesto are already out there with the people.
Can you tell the people what do people expect? What do you have in store for the voters?
I think there's a lot of old problems, challenges, if you may, that this country has faced over these years, and we haven't found a solution to that, or a solution that really is effective to solve those problems. And one of them, of course, is poverty. People are poor. 30% of the population of Fiji is
28%.
estimated. Wow, to me it's 30%. Huh?
38% is the statistics, Mr.
Okay.
Narube.
Yeah, statistics,
Or
plus
are you
or
saying
minus.
give or
plus
take
or
2%?
minus.
That's
Yes,
according
this is
to...
always the case in statistics.
Okay.
Yeah. So that to me is the critical issue. So we need to solve the poverty, because our problems are
How will
not
you solve
political,
it?
they are economic.
How will you solve it?
It's in our manifesto.
How will you
Okay.
solve it? Can you give us some
Let me
examples?
itemize our manifesto. Huh? To us, to me anyway, as I understand it, we have the resources. We have resource-based industry that are not going anywhere. We have our sugar that is declining. We have our gold that is declining. A fishing industry that's not reaching its potential. Agriculture that has dropped from over 20% of GDP to now only 7 or 8%. You know, forestry has really not developed to the extent it should. But we haven't developed those. No. In our manifesto, there are solutions
I wanted to know,
that.
like, for example, let's talk about it, about sugar.
Sugar?
Sugar, if you see the downward trend, it comes from around 1997 onwards, 1997, 98 onwards, when at the time we had about 22,000 plus registered farmers who were planting cane. It's down to about 11,000 now, so almost half. And the direct link to that, Mr. Narube, assessments have been made, and we have spoken to the Fiji Sugar Corporation. One of the direct links is non-renewal of leases. So let's talk about that. What will you do to ensure that more people go into cane farming and more land is available?
Yeah, I think we need to take a step backwards in terms of addressing the challenges in the sugar industry. We must learn from history and also learn from developing countries that have gone to sugar and have pulled back. You know, to me, the problems are multidimensional. You can mention land issue as one. But to me, the basic issue why people are leaving sugar, it doesn't pay. It doesn't give them a return from the hard slog that they do each day. So if they are not returning any to a certain level that they need for the sugarcane farmers, what happens? They vote with their feet. They leave. And that's exactly what's happening.
So accessibility of land is definitely an issue. Do you have any plan for accessibility of land? You said that more can be done in agriculture. How will you ensure that more land is made accessible to ensure that we boost our agriculture exports?
Yeah, in agriculture in totality, including sugar.
Accessibility of land, how will you do that?
The accessibility of the leases of that land for those that wish to lease. But the accessibility to landowners, they already own the land. So they can themselves develop their own resources without leasing. So for those leases...
Mr. Narube, either or, but how will you ensure that more land is being utilized?
Look, the productivity of land is what you're referring to. It is low. There's a lot of arable land that is not worked on. What are the problems there? What are the challenges for that? First is capital. Landowners and land users don't have capital. They don't have affordable capital. They cannot access capital because they are poor in themselves. The second is technical know-how of running a business, of cultivating the right crops and so forth. They don't have that. And thirdly, perhaps the mindset. The mindset is a big issue for us, that people need to think differently from what they have been thinking about in terms of resource use. That's a big and difficult thing to change, but we need to change the mindsets of people.
What will
and
you
finally,
do?
leadership.
What would you do to change the mindset?
Change mindsets? You really have to design a program, of course, that suits different kinds of people, and just go there and talk. That's what the mindset change.
So you're talking about going to the landowners and also those potential farmers who would like to lease land?
Yes.
And what would be your plan to ensure there is access to land?
Okay. Then, of course, the access to land is people that don't own land but wish to access it. That's what you believe you're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah. So we're going to revamp the whole land tenure system. We're going to increase the alter leases from 50 as a minimum. As a minimum. So you can go beyond 50. Go beyond 50 years of lease. But there are certain conditions which are fair and universally acceptable for that use of that resources. That's what we're going to do. So access to land. And when there is expiry of land, government needs to step in. Expiry of leases, government needs to step in and try to reconcile the extension of that lease. That never happened.
There's more leases now being renewed through the Committee of Better Utilization for Land, but definitely there's a lot of idle land at the moment that can be better utilized. I have a caller from Rewa Chosese. Good evening.
So I want to ask Mr. Narube, why did he leave Reserve Bank, or why did he resign from Reserve Bank?
Well, Vinaka, I worked in the Reserve Bank after the 2006 coup up to 2009. And you remember that after 2006 coup, they still carried the 1997 constitution. Up to 2009, when this government decided to abrogate that constitution. The position of the governor of the Reserve Bank is in that constitution, with others as well. So once that constitution was abrogated, this government decided that I should leave the Reserve Bank. That's how I left.
Mr. Savenaca Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji Party. Another question from Samambula Tui. Good evening.
My question should be like, our currency were devalued about 10 years ago. Is the Unity Party, Unity Fiji Party would consider reversing that 20% which was devalued in April 2009? Thank you.
Vinaka, I resisted that devaluation for a long time. I thought that the people were burdened enough at that time with the economy declining and the burden that they were facing in terms of prices. So when you devalue, of course what happens is that the prices of what you buy from overseas, particularly goods and food, rises very, very sharply. So that's why I decided not to devalue the currency. But as soon as I left, you know what happened? At the same week, the new governor devalued the currency by 20%. The cost of living issues that we are facing is basically, a lot of it is caused because of the weakening Fiji dollar. That's what's happening. And for us to be able to arrest or moderate the rise in the cost of living, we need to manage our exchange rate a bit more actively than what we're doing right now, to ensure that we do not depreciate further, because that will help the prices, push the prices up again.
To his question is if there's any way to reverse the devaluation, Mr. Narube.
Yes, we will perhaps not reverse it, but stabilize our exchange rate.
Now, as far as devaluation is concerned, we also have had two devaluations. Was it after the 1987 coup? We had one after the 87 coup and one around 1998 or so?
Right. Yes. We had about 31% in 1987.
31% in 1987.
A huge one.
After the coup?
After the coup. And in 1998. That was not crisis related. It was basically...
Why was it devalued in 1998?
98, I think as we saw what they call the sellability of our exports to those abroad. If we devalue our currency, then our exports are cheaper.
To make it more attractive?
Yeah, make it more attractive and help growth. And if you see the economic growth chart, after that devaluation in 1999, we shot up in our growth to one of the best growth in history. I think it was around 7%.
It was due to the devaluation because we got attractive as an exporter.
Yes, and of course as well as tourism coming in.
Mr. Narube is on Straight Talk tonight, the leader of Unity Fiji Party. You can call on 3314-766. Vilikesa from Lambasa is calling. Vilikesa, good evening to you.
Mr. Narube, if your party got a form government, I just want to know, will there be any changes we'll be bringing into the government? I just want to know whether there will be some changes to the policies that the current government have now implemented, or you'll bring new ones. I just want to know.
Vinaka will certainly bring new ones. We're certainly going to review a lot of existing government policies. And on the economic side, we will build our economic policy on resources that I mentioned before. But we will also assist the private sector grow, because the private sector is the engine of growth. We all know that. They provide us with jobs. So we will give them the support that they need. And the small businesses, of course, are important. And the support that perhaps government is doing now, we in our minds, we don't see that going right to where it is supposed to be helping the small businesses. So we'll make sure that whatever is the assistance given actually reaches the people that need it and produce the right results for everyone. The taxation, for instance. We'll review the taxation of government. And of course, the priorities of government spending. You know, the budget is one of the most, if not the most important instrument in economic development. We need to spend that money, that taxpayers' money wisely. And priorities to me, as I know, budgeting is the key to that. So that is an issue. I think perhaps Vijay will ask me a lot of that questions later, but those are the kind of things that we will need to put in place to ensure that our debt is moderate and stays moderate into the future. So a host of economic issues. And there's a host of land-related issues that is in our manifesto that we would like to review. So yes, the short answer, we will review a lot of policies and we will introduce new ones that we believe will solve our old standing problems that we face.
Thank you, Vilikesa, for that call from Lambasa. Now, Mr. Narube, also policies like continuation of free school fees, will you continue with that?
We will do better.
What will you do better?
We'll provide full free education up to tertiary level.
Up to tertiary level. So you will, the adding on would be everyone going to tertiary. If
you find a place in a approved tertiary institution, you've got a scholarship.
You definitely a numbers man. How much will that cost in a year?
We estimate, because those scholarships are currently being allocated by government, so they're spending already a lot of that money. The new additional students that may come into the scholarship program because of that particular policy, we estimate to be around $50 million additional.
$50 million a year?
A year.
And have you done the figures or looked at the statistics in relation to how much we already have given out as loans, as TELS?
In terms of the TELS,
the tertiary education loan scheme.
Yes, I think it's about 300 million a year given out to TELS under the loan scheme.
Yeah, according to the documents that I have here, loans disbursed through TELS, total lending 2016 to 2017 amounted to 86.4 million. That's in 1 year. And then the lending for 2018 expected to increase to around 159.1 million, mainly due to the changes made in the 2017-2018 budget. 2018-2019 budget total loans are projected to further increase to 205.6 million. So you will write this off, or you will pay it off yourself? How will you do it?
So
that's already that's the students already on TELS. That's the loan.
Right. Yes.
What will you do with that? Definitely you would have done the numbers.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
In addition to free tertiary education, we will forgive.
So you'll take away.
We will forgive those that are the debt of those TELS students that exist right now.
Where will you get the money from?
Forgiveness, it just means write off.
Write off.
It's not the new money that you put to TELS. You just write off the existing debt. It has some impact in your financial accounts that can be easily managed.
And then going forward, you are anticipating around $86 to $100 million a year, maybe for scholarships, for loans.
As I said, they're already paying a bit of that, a lot of that. The additional students that will come on stream because of our policy, to us right now, it would be around 50 million additional allocation.
So what would be the total allocation?
As you have read it out, I think if you include that,
$50 million
yes,
to that. So about close to 150 million a year?
Correct.
So 150 million a year to TELS to make sure that everybody is going to tertiary education.
Yeah, we feel it's a right of each of our students for education to achieve as much as they can.
You're saying we have to reduce our expenditure. This will increase the expenditure. So where will you get more money from?
Not necessarily increase it, Vijay. You know? We can reprioritize expenses within that. You can cut those expenses that we may not need to spend. There's a bit of wastage and fat in the budget.
What type of areas you will cut the spending from?
You look at the freebies that the government is giving.
Which freebies?
That is the free farm and home care, farm care. Yeah? You look at that. That, to my information, is over 100 million. Over.
Now that was done after the cyclones, I believe. That is not an every year budget allocation. It's not a fixed budget allocation.
Yeah, but they found it from somewhere, you see. And even though it was for relief, we all know that those were given out to virtually everybody that applied.
What I'm getting to is that whenever we increase allocations, the question people ask and they want to understand is whether the party will increase taxes and duties to make up for the increase. Can you tell the people of Fiji what your plan is for taxes and duties and for the income tax threshold, which currently stands at $30,000?
Yeah, you know, government has to have taxes to be able to spend on essential services and all the other responsibilities of government. So we believe that it's about time that we actually overhaul the tax system. Have a review of the tax system. We have gone a bit too far to indirect taxes. And I think that could be rectified or reviewed at least in this exercise. And also the threshold, we will leave it as it is.
You leave it at
Why change it?
$30,000.
No need to change.
You leave it at
$30,000.
$30,000. The taxes and duties, you're looking at some increases there or reductions?
The taxes that the companies face, there are about 3 of them, or perhaps 4. The company tax is around 18%, but the actual effective tax rate that the companies actually pay is close to 30%. So to us, we will amalgamate some of those taxes, and in that process review the level, perhaps bring it down.
Anything else that people should be aware of if Unity Fiji forms government, as far as taxes and duties are concerned?
Yeah, I think duties as well. We are imposing duties on housing materials that are not produced here. We'll review that because the house prices are going well beyond the reaches of ordinary families these days. And one of the reasons, of course, maybe is the import duties, the customs duties that we impose on materials, housing materials, that nobody else is here produces. It's basically being imposed to give some money to government.
So you're planning to reduce
Yes.
duty on housing materials?
Housing materials.
Now, what about the free bus fare program that's running right now? There's a certain threshold, and children of those parents, they travel for free.
Yeah, those will continue.
You will continue with that. The social pensions that are in place?
Yeah, we would like to review that, but we will continue with all pensions that are in place. We feel that we need to reward or ensure that our pensioners that have contributed a lot to building this nation has enough to live on. So we will review pensions and increase some.
Now, that is Unity Fiji Party leader, Mr. Savenaca Narube, will be back right after this break.
Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan continues after the break.
Raota uma arotuma, raota uma arotuma, nefu ewo, ne Pacifica. Sirian okia fenga ma okia fenga ne o I ea fate ela mane a ete hente ela mane a mase tra la 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 mayon exio la enelia no atofu e palangasta oni akia ase afnaha kuya helava Chuchu peche imamodusa Oi na faama marhaa Itumuta Solo ngane hasta Hasta la sol kikia celosa Solo makia hace sol roa Kuya helava Solo ngane hasta Cha la 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 Mayon exio la enelia Ei inya leyanta kayo mawawa Ne se talayora pola yola anya Ya abat nego Mama semao Mayone ofin sego Marosio Popo iango La taya eo Popo iango la taya eo Noa ia Eskef bene isi Malo bene isi Ma omistela la otomis Fu omus Raota uma arotuma Raota uma arotuma Nefu ewo Ne pacifica
This is Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan.
Good evening. Our guest tonight on Straight Talk is the leader of Unity Fiji Party, Mr. Savenaca Narube, and you can call us on 3314-766 with your questions. We have a question from Ali from Nasinu. Good evening, Ali.
Okay, can I ask Mr. Narube that will he be bringing back the GGC back?
Yeah, that's a question too that we are asked regularly. I think I eat okay myself, and I understand the importance of hierarchy and chiefs in our eat okay system. So we will establish a great council of chiefs, and we will give it also a development role. A development role that they lead the development that I was explaining earlier in this program, to push our resource owners to develop their resources and change mindsets. That to me is an important role for the new established Great Council of Chiefs. Of course, they have a political role as well, and that we will then determine when we establish a Great Council of Chiefs.
So, Mr. Narube, just getting clarification on Great Council of Chiefs, you're saying it also will have a political role. It's not in the Constitution. How will you bring back the GCC?
Well, some of the big changes that we have in mind will need a review of the Constitution. I know it's difficult to change the Constitution, but we will examine all avenues of changing the Constitution, reviewing it to introduce some of these new features that to us is very important for us to be able to chart our new way forward. And One of them, of course, will be the roles of the Great Council of Chiefs. If we are unable to review the Constitution or to change the Constitution and do not, that prevents the Great Council of Chiefs of looking at political issues, we could do it in other means, or we could examine ways of them playing a different role around what is permitted under the Constitution.
But you want it to have a political role as well?
It may be. In my thinking, and I'm out of my depth here on what could be the political roles of Great Council of Chiefs, that they themselves, in their positions in the village, they do play that role in their own jurisdiction.
Will you look at also involving the Mbosini Turanga then, all the chiefs of Fiji, because the Mbose Levu Wakaturanga was set up by the British back in the 1870s?
Yes. Yeah, it could extend to whatever size or whatever participation.
So you may look at a Mbosini Turanga or a Mbose Levu Wakaturanga?
Sure. That's a possibility. But we will consult very widely on this, because it's an important issue for the Itoke.
By when will you make the change if you form government? When will you start work on that?
We have set out a bit of our priorities when we start. Of course, we can't do everything all at once.
Is that one of your priorities?
But that would be one of them.
One of them. So that's one of the first things that you'll do?
One of the first things.
What else?
The others, of course, is to look at the e-ticketing, because that is a big burden on the poor. The second is, of course, to look at the cost of living, see if we can implement those changes straight away. We can start by looking at the prioritization of the government budget to ensure that we free up resources to more urgent priorities. So those would be some of the list of our agenda items in the first 100 days or so.
Well, what will you do with e-ticketing?
E-ticketing penalizes the poor. I've been preaching that from day one. The poor are the ones that catches the buses. They don't have cars. And they don't have much money. So the poor are being required of this system to pay their fares in advance of travel. They don't have that money that is floating around like richer people. So they pay their amount in advance before they catch the bus. As you all realize, this system has been established in other countries that are much richer than us. But even in many of those, passengers are allowed to pay in cash. And we, one of the 7 times poorer, we have been made mandatory for everybody to pay. And we're talking about the poor. The poor, in my view, in what I know, just have enough money to pay for one way, perhaps.
So what will you do? You'll remove it completely?
No. We will allow passengers to pay in cash.
So you can pay
That's
in
an
cash, or you pay
or
with
if
a
you
card.
prefer card, go ahead.
They have a system at the moment where you can purchase the disposable cards. You think that's not enough?
I think that I've heard many stories of that.
Not working
If you
out
pay $2 of a disposable card and your journey is only $1.40, what happens to the balance?
You can redeem it from Vodafone. That was confirmed.
If you can, there's a big process that you follow, and you need to front up to something.
Just remove the disposable card system. You can pay cash.
Just pay cash.
One of the issues being raised there is that pilferage will continue, with the bus operators saying that even the bus drivers, then you'll go back to the old system of bus drivers handling cash, more cash than what they're handling at the moment.
My comment to that is that if an employee is pilfering, is stealing money from the employer, it's between the employer and the employee. Why should the public get involved at all in this matter? So they can put in cameras, they can put in checkers, they can put whatever to be able to minimize
When will you
pilferage.
When will you implement the new system if you do form government, Mr.
Very
Narube?
quickly.
Very quickly. How quickly?
Oh, we'll have to look at all the legislations if there are some that we need to amend. If not, then this is an administrative policy or a policy of cabinet, and that
There's a
we
law
could do.
governing it, so you would have to change.
We
it.
might have to change that.
Now, you said you would like to review the Constitution. What are some of the things you want changed in the Constitution?
Well, one of the issues that you touch on is Great Council of Chiefs. One, the other one is the retirement age. It shouldn't be there. The third one is the members of the Constitutional Officers Commission. It's all government. It shouldn't be. It should be independent. It should be from the private sector. That it used to be. There are a few others, but those are some of the things that we will ask
The
for review.
Constitutional Officers Commission has got also the leader of opposition, and the Prime Minister can appoint people from outside, I believe.
Yes, those are the only two members from our side. There are three members
Three
of government,
members and three
and
members
it's
from
in the
outside.
Constitution is chaired by the Prime Minister.
So what will you change it to?
We'll change the membership to all private sector with one or two representatives from them.
Now, the chair will be the private sector.
Yes,
Now,
it should be.
in relation to the Constitution change, you said the retirement age, you want that changed as well. We know that the Constitution requires, any change requires 75% of support of members of Parliament and 75% support of the total registered number of voters in a referendum. How will you go about doing that?
I think some of these changes, we expect a broad support from the public, that we will get the 75% to support those changes. Because to me, those changes are logical. There's another change that I forgot to mention, Vijay, and that's the change in public financial management and the employment or the terms and conditions of private sector, of the public servants, civil servants that are in the Constitution. The role of PSC has been removed entirely in that.
The Public Service Commission is only tasked, their constitutional role is there to appoint the permanent secretaries.
Yes, but as you know, the permanent secretary with the ministers can determine the terms and conditions of whoever they recruit in their own ministry.
Within the ministry.
Yes.
Now, we've got a caller from Nandi. Suresh, good evening.
Can you just tell us, if your party will go in the parliament, will you keep the same constitution? Are you gonna make another constitution, or change the constitution? And secondly, will you make Fiji a Christian state, or leave it like as it is? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we will examine the options that are available to the changes in Constitution. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding that the processes of changing the Constitution is quite difficult. But we'll have to go through that process and change its elements in the Constitution. So that's something that we will try to do. And if we fail to do that, then of course those things that we want to change may not be possible. But the other issue that you raised was on
Christian state.
a Christian state. Yeah, some of these sensitive issues. I'm a Christian myself. I believe in Christian principles, and the principles of Christianity to me are universal. We all share that. The love of one another, the value of one another, and respect, of course, compassion, forgiveness. Those are Christian values, and I'm sure other religions have those values. But I feel that those kind of fundamental changes to Constitution should be put back to the people. Those are sensitive issues, and the people need to make their voices known. So that's what we will do.
So as leader of Unity Fiji, Suresh from Nandi is asking about Christian state. Will you take it to the people and ask them whether Fiji should be a Christian state? Or what is the party's stand on whether Fiji should be a Christian state?
If there is a demand from the people, and we are hearing demand from the people to relook at that, the question that you ask in a referendum has to be quite well framed. You don't ask open-ended questions, I believe. So we'll see what kind of questions that may be relevant for that.
What is the party's stand? What is the party's stand on the matter? Should Fiji be a Christian state?
What the party stand doesn't matter.
No,
to me,
you're going into the elections.
My party doesn't matter.
You're going into
it's what the people
Mr. Narumbe,
wants to know.
You're going into the elections, and I'm only asking you this question because we want a straight answer.
Sure.
Your party going into election, wanting to form government. Now, people are going to the polls from November 5th. They would want to know your clear stand on this issue.
Our clear stand, Vijay, is this is a sensitive issue for the people of Fiji. I think as a government, we need to listen to the people. We need to go back to the people and see what their stands are. Our party is made up of different religions. They have different views on this. So, to me, sorry, I will have to insist we must go back to the people.
Mr. Narumbe, the Unity Fiji party leader. Now, we have Choeli from Nosori with another question. Good evening, Choeli.
Mr. Narumbe, I'm just trying. Can you just confirm? Is it true that we have $2 billion in our reserve bank, or they're trying to impress us because we are still taking loan from other countries? Can you just please confirm if it is true?
Yeah, Vinaka, what we were talking about earlier with Vijay is our foreign reserves. This is a pool of money that the country keeps offshore, that we use that pool of money to pay for all our imports. That's what I believe we were talking about. And it's normally calculated, the adequacy of that foreign reserves is normally calculated by how many months of imports that pool of foreign reserves can pay for in one time. So I said 5 months. So that's what we were talking about. The debt of government may be different. I don't know whether you were referring to that. And we haven't talked about that.
Now, Govin from Nandi has another question. Good evening, Govin.
Mr. Narumbe, please, can you explain how will you get these farmers who has been displaced by a non-renewal of leases? They've already come to the urban centers and they are enjoying the luxury of the life there. What would you do to bring them back, and how much forecast price of sugar per ton you're going to give, and for how many years? And another question that I want to ask him, who will be your Prime Minister if you happen to win this election and form a government? Thank you.
Mr. Narumbe.
Okay. Thank you. I believe your first, let me answer the first one, the Prime Ministership. I think the Prime Ministership will be determined after the election. Normally it's tradition that a party leader assumes that if we win outright, but if we don't, then perhaps there may be other arrangements.
So if you win all outright, it'll be you.
Well, naturally, that's the tradition. The other question on sugar price, we are going to move straight away to $110 per ton of cane. Because I believe, as I mentioned earlier, the major problems in the sugar industry is that it's not giving the farmers a high enough return for that. And that's why we're moving it up to $110 per ton. But we're also going to try to see how we can best solve the situation in the sugar industry. and that we're going to form a sugar commission of whatever the name should be, to examine all the related issues in the sugar field. But one issue that we'll also introduce is this: the payment to farmers is too infrequent. It's 3 months or 4 months. They struggle to find their cash flow during that period. We're going to shorten that to a month.
Now, Mr. Narube, just in relation to that, with $110 per ton for sugar, our sugar prices also we're selling at is fluctuating, and at times the prices go low because it's the world market prices now. We do not get preferential prices for sugar anymore through the EU. How will you ensure that you continue with that $110 per ton payment?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the payments to farmers depend on the revenue we get from our sugar sales abroad. As we all know, we have been supported for all these years by the preferential prices, which are much higher, that are paid from the EU on our sugar. If you take that preferential prices out, the price of our sugar drops to the market, to the world market value, which is much lower than what we're getting right now. The challenges of that, we'll need to look at how efficient are we milling our sugar. Is centralizing the milling process the right answer for us? Or should we look at other options like other countries have done? And we look at the products that we sell from sugar.
Do you think we need to go into bigger scale farms and mechanization, which has started now?
Perhaps. But perhaps the milling part, the extraction part of the sugar cane may be decentralized as well. We are not forgetting the Raki mill. We think that might be a good opportunity there for a private run mill.
To look at options of doing that. Now, for you saying there's a lot of options available. Will you put this in the manifesto, or will you be having these discussions if you form government on how to do things as far as sugar is concerned?
We don't have all the answers, unfortunately. So we will form this sugar commission to really examine all components in the sugar industry.
And then find out
what best fits us.
Thank you, Mr. Narube, Unity Fiji leader, Mr. Savenaca Narube, on Straight Talk tonight. Now, we also have questions being raised about government debt. Our government debt stands at about $5.1 billion at the moment. They're saying that the debt to GDP ratio is around 45%. How do you rate that? Are we good? As a former governor of the Reserve Bank, we've been in worse places, I believe, according to the statistics, where we were sitting at 53% in 2006, one of the highest as far as debt to GDP ratio is concerned, 53%, and now we are sitting on at about 45%, end of 2017, 45.6%. What's your assessment of that?
Yes, the reasonable of the level of debt for a country can be measured in many ways. What we need to understand here in Fiji, and that's what I've been talking about, is we are quite vulnerable as a nation. And that vulnerability comes from many sources. One of them, of course, is natural disasters, hurricanes, droughts, flooding, and so forth. And the other, we are open economy, which means we rely on the international economy for our tourists, for our imports, and our exports as well. So when we are in that kind of country, we must determine our level of debt accordingly. An international benchmark of that is 35% of GDP. You see, we right now if any of those risks come home to roost, we do not have a cushion on our debt level. You see, and many of you know this, there is escalating trade wars going around in the world between the U.S. and China. It will come here. The impact of it will come to Fiji. If that happens, our economic growth will plummet, and of course our economy, the jobs will suffer, and of course our financial position and so forth. We need to be conservative when it comes to debt. And that's why I think the 45% is way too much for us.
So you're aiming for 35%.
35 is the norm.
So what will you do? You'll stop the borrowing when you go into government?
Yeah, borrowing comes from spending. When you spend more than what you get through taxes, then of course you need to borrow. So the solution to debt is spend less.
Spend less.
Spend less.
So
reprioritize that spending.
So you will cut the budget.
Not necessarily. I think spend less in less
Cut the
priority
budget
areas.
means spend less.
No, you can spend less in less priority area and spend more in others.
So
the impact,
maintain the budget, but at the moment we have a deficit budget. We have to borrow. Every
Yes.
year we do borrow. So we have to borrow.
yes,
So
Yep.
we will not be cutting. We'll still be borrowing to continue with our spend.
yeah. In financial management, the rate that you borrow matters.
So
How
we will
fast?
borrow.
How fast you borrow. You know, this government has tripled our debt in 12 years.
I've got some statistics here. I wanted to talk to you about that in relation to borrowings, in relation to government debt. In 2006, according to the Reserve Bank of Fiji statistics, the total government debt stood at $2.8 billion, and now it's $5.1 billion. When we have asked the question, the Ministry of Economy has stated that people need to remember that $2.8 billion debt existed in 2006, and they've borrowed. The borrowing has continued after that as loans continue to be paid. The government that's come in, they have to borrow. What is your assessment of that?
The fact is this. One, your debt has increased, which means you have borrowed more and more than you repaid. That's why it's increasing. Fact number two is that your debt is increasing because you're spending much more. And the difference between your income and your expenditure has risen. That's why it's rising so rapidly in 12 years. So that's the fact. The debt that they found when they started is of course a debt. But that debt has been created over 36 years to come to 2.8 billion.
2.8
In 12
billion
years,
in
it has
2006.
ballooned to over 5.1 billion. And if
$5.1
you
billion
add other guarantees of the state of debt, that amount rises to over $6 billion.
Now, I'm asking the question, if you come into government, how will you stabilize the debt level?
Yeah, we look at that deficit that we have, the deficit.
So you'll reduce the deficit.
Reduce the deficit
So
over
reduce
time.
the borrowing.
And over time, the rate of the build-up in your debt reduces over
I guess
time.
the people would want to know, if Unity Fiji does form government, you're saying you will reduce the budget deficit, so you will reduce your borrowing levels, and what is your ultimate aim? To reduce the debt level to what levels that you will be comfortable as the leader of Unity Fiji if you do form government?
Yeah, I think we have to reduce it by 9% of GDP.
9% of GDP, and what would be
That's about 36% of
about 36% of GDP. Now, what would be your target? You will definitely have to do it in phases.
Yes.
So what would be your target in the
I think
next
within
how many years?
Within 4 years.
Within 4 years.
Realistically,
Now,
we should be able to bring that
Also,
down.
there's some comments being made by people and shared on social media and seen as fake news that has been circulated. You must have seen it as a former governor of Reserve Bank. You could highlight it as well in relation to some people who are saying we are being sold to China, and soon Kandavu will be taken over by China. The listeners would be interested in that as well, about some of this information that's going around. As a former Reserve Bank of Fiji governor, what do you have to say about that?
As my tabu from Kandavu, I think it might not be a bad idea to sell Kandavu. But seriously, I think if you look at the sources of borrowing of this government, you know, when I was in government was mostly from World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. But now you see the borrowing from countries themselves, individual countries, and China is increasing very rapidly. It's now over $500 million. The conditions of lending or borrowing from these different types of sources are totally different. So we just need to strike the right balance there between the borrowing from international organization and borrowing from one country. On China taking over any kind of security for the loan, well, in Fiji may not be the case, but China has done it in a few countries. It's taken over the running of the Sri Lankan ports because they couldn't pay their debt to China. But those are the kind of sensitivities we just need to be aware of when we sources our loan from.
But Kandavu is not being taken over by China.
No, I can reassure my Tobu that you are not being taken over.
Now, in relation to, you said China, the debt with China at about 500 million is a bit too much. What, as a leader of Unity Fiji, what would be the ideal debt level?
No,
with a
I'm
country
not
like
saying
China?
it's not too much. It's too much, but I'm saying it has risen quite rapidly in the last 12 years.
So if you do come into government, you would borrow less from countries like those and look at World Bank and IMF?
You have to look at particularly the cost of borrowing from each of these sources, the other conditions that they may be there for these kind of loans, and of course the currency that you are borrowing with. The currency, that's very important as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narube, clarifying some issues as a leader of Unity Fiji on government debt and borrowings, on how Unity Fiji will handle things and how they plan to do things if they get into government. We have another question from Edwin. Edwin from Lautoka. Good evening.
So all of us will be called Fijians, or it will get back to the UK and the Indo-Fijian, how they used to call us before. So I just want to know, it will be established.
No, yeah, thank you. I fully support us being named, common name, as we have now, as a Fijian. I really just disappointed on how it was done. More consultation should have been done to the Itoke, because that is their name, has been their name for centuries. But I think that was not done properly. But I'm comfortable with one name that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Narube, clarifying the issue about common name. He is happy with the common name, although he does not agree with, not happy with the way things were done. But it's not an issue for Unity Fiji that will be going into a review of the constitution with.
No.
Okay. Mr. Narube, Unity Fiji leader. Now, what is your stand on Itoke land lease distribution? At the moment, it's equal. Some parties like Sodelpa said that they will bring back the old system. What is the stand of the Unity Fiji party?
I think for us, this issue is a sensitive one. That government has introduced equal distribution of leases, and every individual receives the same. And many individuals have welcomed that and say that's a good source of income for them. Unlike in the past, they may not have received anything. But we must protect the hierarchy of the Fijian people, the hierarchy of chiefs. And we have different ways of addressing that. We will leave the equal distribution of land leases and address that through other means that we have. What we are talking about of exploiting or using our resources more than what we're doing now is through that process. If we have the e-toke to use that resources, use that vehicle to then redistribute some income back to our chiefs.
To get more money. Now, Mr. Narube, in relation to unutilized e-toke land, that question has been asked and it has been addressed already. You'll be looking at having discussions with the resource owners. What is your stand on the current voting system, Unity Fiji? Is it looking at going back to 1997 constitution where we had ethnic-based voting and 20 open seats, 51 were ethnic-based seats? What is your stand on the matter?
I think one person, one vote is the future of our voting system. But I am personally disagree with our current legislation on voting. We have one national constituency, and through that you will have some parliamentarians that will receive less votes than some that are not in parliament. That is not democracy for me. So we will relook at that. The threshold of 5% of the voters, that means that you either have 0 seat or 3 seats. So that's not not fair to.
Mr. Narube, what kind of voting system will you look at?
We'll look at a fairer voting system.
Do you have a system in mind?
Yes, we will relook at this one national constituency and see whether we can break it up into smaller constituencies, maybe not as small as we used to have, but then use that as the basis of electing parliamentarians. And that's fair.
And you will maintain 51 seats at the moment? You will increase the number of seats?
Or we'll maintain that.
Or the actual voting system as well, the way people vote, will you change that as well?
The process itself, yeah. We will strengthen the process to reduce any risk of an unfair election.
Now, when are you expected to do that? Again, you have to change the constitution for that.
There are some elements of it in the constitution, but the laws itself contains a lot of that process. The law, the electoral laws.
But it's connected again to the constitution.
There are some connections, but I think we can review those acts without impinging.
Review those laws as well.
Yeah, impinging on the constitutional provisions.
Mr. Narube, we've got a question from Sailosi from Rewai. Good evening, Sailosi.
Good evening, Mr. Narube. My question is, how are you going to tackle or improve our health system? Especially, Mr. Narube, that we are facing a crisis of NCDs in the country.
Yes, I fully agree with you that our health system needs to be relooked at, particularly our facilities and provisions of services in our hospitals and health centers, and of course the medicine. We'll continue the subsidy of medicine and may be extended to those that need assistance in that regard. The other issue for us on health, we will make sure that there is adequate number of health centers right across Fiji, because that's the first kind of service that we need in the outer areas, out of the urban areas, access to health care. And this comes from health centers. So we'll increase the number of health centers across across Fiji.
Thank you, Mr. Narumbe. We've got two questions similar in nature. There's Chone from Lami and Gabi from Nasese, both asking whether you will look at the minimum wage rate and whether you will increase it.
Yes, we will increase the minimum wage rate to $4 an hour as the lower bound. We won't have just one minimum wage. We will have a range from $4 to $5, depending on the size of the company, perhaps the employers, the profitability, and so forth. That will start at the $4 an hour floor and will go up to $5. Why we chose $4? Because we believe that is where the poverty line is. We need to give some dignity of living to all our people, particularly those at the lowest tier of our workers. So we won't just look at the minimum wages. I think it's an error just to look at minimum wages on its own. Minimum wages should come in your economic package. You have to look at what your policies for growing the economy, supporting the private sector, supporting also the small businesses. So I know that there'll be some impact on businesses at $4 an hour, but in the other component of this package, we look at tax breaks to compensate that. So everybody wins. The worker takes home a reasonable pay, a living pay, and the business, okay, it's not adversely affected.
Mr. Narumbe, the Textile Clothing and Footwear Council came out today and said that any minimum wage rate, $4, $5 or $10 that some parties are offering will damage the industry. They contribute about $100 million in foreign exchange in a year, and they said there's about 7,000 jobs, and it may be the death of the industry, according to the council. They made a statement today. What do you have to say to that?
I think they have a relevant point in terms of the cost to whatever outputs they produce. But as I said, we could go around in the roundabout and look at some relief on the taxation side.
To give them some concessions.
Yes, of course, based on whatever level of minimum wages that they can afford.
So how soon will you implement the $4 upwards minimum wage rate?
Again, we would like to do that as quickly as possible. And, of course, the laws and regulations will need to be amended.
Now, what if the employers say, we cannot sustain that, we're losing out, we have to get people off? NFP has said that they will have a law in place to ensure that no one is sacked because the employers may say that these many workers have to go. NFP has said they'll have a law in place. How will Unity Fiji do it?
We'll use the existing dispute mechanism where if a firm or a company says that we can't afford to pay that minimum wages, then there is a process that needs to be followed, and I think there is one. And for that, either it's a tribunal or whoever decides at the end of that process of what is the status of that company.
So you'll implement it. If any employer says, we want to get rid of the workers, it will be going through the dispute mechanism.
No, what I'm saying, if it says we cannot pay the $5, it means that we will have to reduce our employment. Then they could follow that mechanism.
That's Mr. Savenaca Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji. Now, just finishing off, you are going into the elections, no doubt, to form government. How many seats are you targeting to win in this year's general elections?
That's a tough question. We are a new party, but we're not a small party. To us, that issue of smallness or big will be determined by the voters themselves. This is a new party, has won elections in the past in Fiji and, of course, abroad. So for us, we're growing. As people get to know us and get to know what policies, manifesto that we'll bring to them. Our support is growing. We feel that we have some areas that are particularly important.
How many seats have you targeted?
No, we are not targeting
Any
seats.
seat? You're not targeting any seat?
We are not targeting any number of seats. We will get as many seats as we possibly can.
Now, if you do have to form a coalition to form the next government, who will you work with?
We've been talking amongst the parties not in government. And unfortunately, we aim to get a coalition before elections. That is one of our aims in establishing Unity Fiji, but we couldn't do that.
Why you couldn't do that?
I mean, that's an issue that we can all the parties need to answer. But for us, it was difficult to come in late and try to establish a platform for all parties. And it should have started some time ago to bring in a common platform that everybody is comfortable with. And that's reality of it.
You'll work with any party that, if you do have to work with to form a coalition, who are contesting the elections?
We are discussing with all the parties outside government of possibility of a coalition after.
That's which SODELPA,
NFP, Labour.
What if you caught in a situation that you may also have to talk to Fiji first?
I don't want to speculate on anything, but all I need to say that it's easier for us to form a coalition of those that we already discussing this coalition
with those parties, SODELPA, NFP, Labour, and
correct
Hope Party.
Yeah.
So you're talking to them actively still at this stage?
At this stage, perhaps not as much as a few weeks ago, but yes.
But those talks continue at this stage. That's Mr. Narube, the leader of Unity Fiji on Straight Talk. Mr. Narube, thank you on behalf of our listeners on VTFM and also viewers on Facebook on Fiji Village that you took out your time to come and talk to the people about your policies. Unity Fiji, they are releasing their manifesto on Friday, and definitely will bring you details about that when Mr. Narube announces all the policies. And we'll have more discussions on that as well. Tomorrow night on Straight Talk, we will have two parties going head-to-head discussing issues. We have Fiji First General Secretary Mr. Ayaz Syed Qayyum and National Federation Party leader Professor Biman Prasad. They have come in already and talked about a number of the broad policies and what they're looking at going into the 2018 general elections, and they will be coming on Straight Talk at 7 p.m. tomorrow right here, and also next week at 7 p.m. on Tuesday we have Hope Party leader Tupou Ndalo. We're still having discussions to have more parties coming in, two parties to thresh out issues amongst themselves, and you can also ask questions. We'll get you to send in your questions. So those plans are currently underway. We'll give you more details tomorrow night. But Straight Talk comes back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with Ayaz Syed Qayyum and Professor Biman Prasad. Till then, good evening.
The 2018 general elections, the issues that matter, the people that matter. This is Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan.